Peace be upon you and welcome to the closing press conference for the 24-hour prayer vigil for a just budget. My name is Jamel Coy Hudson. I'm your brother in the struggle for the liberation and the emancipation of poor people in this nation. I'm very happy to be here with each of you today. And on behalf of Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, Executive Director of the Cairo Center for Religion, Rights, and Social Justice, and Reverend Wes McNeil, Executive Director of the Labor Religion Coalition, and faith leaders from across the entire state, we want to thank each of you. Thank you for joining us. We have assembled here as faith leaders, clergy, lay people, to conclude 24 hours of praying and calling on the Lord of our religious traditions and the creators of our religious traditions to intercede and assist us as we demand that this state pass a budget that is just. You know, a budget, it reflects so much about the priorities of what leadership, and, where they allocate their funds. Right now, we know that the state budget is late. There's ongoing negotiations between the leaders in the legislative body and the governor, and there are some questions that we know have not been answered. I want to list just a few. That there's a $454 million potential cut to school districts that's being proposed by Governor Kathy Hochul. We know that more than $1 billion worth of cuts to Medicaid programs, which include cutting home care workers' wages and reducing in-home services for people with disabilities and the elderly. And we know that there's a 50% cut to clean water infrastructure that's being proposed by the governor. When we hear all of these potential cuts and the way in which the lives of poor people are being moved like pawns on a chess layer, we must bear witness today. We cannot afford to continue to allow politicians to neglect the needs of the poor and those who are marginalized. Both parties must be held to account for their cruel manipulation of the poor. So in the tradition of Dr. King, in the tradition of Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker, we who believe have come here with our respective faith traditions to ask the governor, the legislators, a simple question. Which side are you on? Are you on the side of the people? Are you on the side of those who elected you to do the job that you said you were going to do? Or will you allow interest groups and those who don't care about the masses of people to dictate the policies that are passed? So you'll hear the voices of many faith leaders who have answered the call and will share how they've been in prayer and meditation and in song to lift their voice to this very important time we're in, this kairotic time we're in. But before we invite these leaders up, I want to offer some arts and culture to ground us and ask these leaders, which side are you on? I know that the people I'm on this Zoom room with right now are on the freedom side. I believe that the depths of my heart and soul. So if you know the song, I welcome you and invite you to sing along with me. We're going to sing about 3 or 4 verses of this song. Here's a rendition of it. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Listen, Dr. King was a freedom fighter. He taught me how to fight. And we're gonna fight all day and night until we get it right. Oh, which side are you on? Oh, which side are you on? Come on. Oh, which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Listen, a Reverend West is a freedom fighter. They're teaching me how to fight. Woo! And we're gonna fight all day and night until we get it right. Oh, which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? Listen, a Reverend Liz is a freedom fighter. She teaching me how to fight. And we're gonna fight all day and night until we get it right. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Y'all help me. Which side are you on, my people? Oh, which side are you on? I got one more. Listen, you and I are freedom fighters. We're learning how to fight. And we're going to fight all day and night until we get it right. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on, my people? Which side are you on? I'm choosing freedom. And I know my fellow comrades are as well. We're choosing freedom. We're choosing justice. I thank you all so much. And at this moment in time, let's invite our friend, our comrade in the struggle, Reverend West, to take us to the next portion of our program. I leave you with peace. God bless.
Good morning. Thank you so much, Brother Jamel, for that grounding and for kicking us off. Welcome again to all of you who are joining us on Zoom or via the live stream. My name is Reverend West McNeil, and I'm the Executive Director of the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State, and also a minister in the United Church of Christ. And at this hour, we have come to the end of a 24-hour prayer vigil where 24 religious leaders from across our state and from multiple traditions have been praying in shifts for our lawmakers to reach a just state budget agreement. We know how much is at stake. New Yorkers' access to adequate housing and healthcare and food and education and living wages and a safe environment depend on the policies that right now are being negotiated behind closed doors. And so we have to come together in prayer and in action. For too long, the budget has been balanced in effect on the backs of the poor. And we need a truly moral budget that will increase taxes on New York's wealthiest people and most profitable companies and make lasting investments in poor and working class communities. So this morning, we're going to continue to be in prayer, and we're going to hear from faith and community leaders about where things stand and some of the critical issues at stake and why this matters so much. And I want to begin in a spirit of prayer by sharing some words submitted by one of the Vigil participants, Adam Barnes of the Freedom Church of the Poor, who is based in New York City. And he wrote, "I pray a prayer of thanks for the abundant resources of the state. I pray that we see tax revenue not as giving more power and value to those who paid more tax, but as a collective commitment of all to the well-being of all. I pray that lawmakers, elected officials, everyone concerned with the well-being of the people and resources of the state will have the courage to ask ourselves honestly, is this budget just? Is it working to ensure the basic dignity and value of all life? Does it strive for a world where all can thrive? I pray that we ask these questions as lawmakers, as citizens, as people of faith, as the poor and dispossessed, as leaders accountable to our people. And I pray that if we are not holding the dignity and value and thriving of life at the center, that we always take action to do so. May we always be humbled in knowing that in deciding budgets, we hold a divine-like power to determine who lives, who dies, who thrives, and who suffers. Amen." I want to turn it over and invite now Carolyn Martinez-Class from the Invest in Our New York campaign, who is with us. Thank you so much, to say a few words about where we stand with this budget.
Good morning, and thank you all for having me join you today. I just want to walk a little bit through kind of what has played out in this budget process and where we are today. So a few months ago in January, it feels like a lifetime ago now, the governor put forward a budget proposal that cuts schools, cuts healthcare, and fails to meet the moment on so many different fronts, including addressing the climate crisis, the housing crisis, the runaway inequality we have in our state. For context, New York is the most economically unequal place in the country. That is not because that is not normal. That is not inherent to being here in New York. That is a product of policies that for decades have divested from our public good and have failed to invest in working class people and have instead prioritized millionaires and billionaires over everyday New Yorkers. So that's not normal. That's not natural, the inequality we have in our state. The fact that over 100,000 children have nowhere to sleep in our state is not, none of that is status quo. That is the result of policy choices made every day in Albany. And Governor Hochul's proposed budget is a continuation of those policy choices. In response, sometime mid-March, which also feels very long ago, the legislative leaders put forward their own budget proposals. In response to the governor's proposal, those budget proposals reversed they reversed cuts to education, cuts to healthcare, and meaningfully invested in immediately housing people who are currently unhoused by putting forward $250 million for the Housing Access Voucher Program, additional funds for public housing, for childcare, for healthcare. So they really put forward budget plans that, while they are not what is needed, they do not go far enough, are steps in the right direction and reject the governor's austerity approach. And that was a couple weeks ago. And where we are right now are in three-way negotiations. It is an inherently very secretive process. You don't get a ton of information coming out, and the three people making decisions at the highest level are the governor herself, the Speaker of the Assembly, Carl Hastie, and the Majority Leader, Andrea Stewart-Cousins. We know that they are currently in the process of negotiating on housing in particular as an issue, and we know it's more critical and urgent to ensure that every New Yorker who's currently unhoused be housed, and that every New Yorker who is facing risk of eviction be protected. And so, tenant protections in the form of good cause, as well as ensuring that there is a housing access voucher program included in the final budget, are kind of critical things that are being negotiated in this moment. And we know that there's a lot of pieces remaining from being negotiated, whether that's education, whether that's childcare, whether that's healthcare. We know that there are big pieces of our budget that remain to be resolved. And we're looking to the leadership of the Senate and the Assembly to really hold the line for what working class communities need, and for the governor to actually come to the table and drop all this austerity rhetoric and proposals.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Carolyn, for giving this update and being with us today, and for your leadership in this important struggle. I want to invite now Sahib Shekima, who we're very honored to have joining with us from the Muslim community of the Capital District, bringing a word from some of the local mosques in our community about this issue.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I am here speaking on behalf of the Muslim leadership and by default, the Muslim community. And I'm going to actually read a quote here before even I start my part. Let's recommit ourselves to being good to one another and spreading the enduring messages of hope, kindness, and compassion that marks this season. Guess who said that? Our governor. Isn't that interesting? And here we are today, coming all together on behalf of our own communities and behalf of those who are impacted the most, yet they have no impact in making these decisions. And as a faith leader, I know something, and this is a message to our leaders out there. Leaders, that when they take this responsibility, it's not a privilege, it's a service. And God has told us that, at least in our faith, and I'm sure this is something reflected in all other faiths, we are the custodians. And once we assume that position, that means it's more of an obligation rather than a privilege. And to be a custodian, that means you have to take care of those around you, the people that you represent, and the environment that you're supposed to be protecting. And this specific message goes to the governor. Unfortunately, I always say this: either you're a politician or you are a representative. If you are a representative, you are going to represent the people that elected you, the people that you should care for. If you are a politician, I don't have to say anything about that. Everybody knows what I mean by that. So, as a member of the Muslim community, as a member of New York State, the United States, and the world, because these decisions not only impact our children, our families, they do impact the entire world. When we decide to be on the wrong side, history is recording that. And even though we are here, just a few of us, this is a historical moment. And we are making this call, not only to our governor, but also to every elected official. You have been elected to serve the people. You are public servants. And here, just like us here, the faith leaders, we know that we're not leaders as privileged, but we are going to answer to God. And we have to answer to our people before we answer to God. We know exactly what's on the table. And I think we have been silent for too long. And I promise this because it's part of my faith. And I know God created me for this purpose, and that is to serve. I will continue to be part of this fight. My community will continue to be part of this fight this year, next year, a decade from now, to make sure that when we say peace upon you, we mean it for each and every person. It's not only for the select few. And I'm going to mention this. I love people and I love math, but I hate to use numbers to represent people. About 40% of our children here in this state, they're actually under the poverty line. They live in households that are actually under the poverty line. That's if that doesn't break your heart, I don't know what else. And this is my message. Please remember that you are to be held accountable, if not in this world, in the hereafter. And thank you so much for having me. And God bless all of you. May God continue to utilize us to be the voices of those who are unheard. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you so much, Sahib, for that really powerful and important message. We are very blessed to have with us also today Liz McGriff, who is with the Citywide Tenant Union of Rochester, to speak to some of the really critical issues that are being discussed right now.
Thank you. I appreciate being here with this esteemed panel of experts in the field. And I really appreciate the opportunity to speak about what's going on in Rochester. What we're seeing in Rochester is an influx of a lot of investment developers and the influence that they're having on our local government. And I know that's also happening on the state level as well. In 2019, we won the right to do emergency tenant protection, and they created it as an opt-in program for emergency tenant protection. We are now in the process of implementing the opportunity to opt in. This was one of 24 different things that were won in 2019. And we had pushback from landlords, not the first time we did a vacancy study. So we're going now and we're pushing our local government to do a vacancy study so we can opt into rent stabilization, which is basically rent control. And it also has some good cause protection in it, but this is one small step that we need in the process of helping people in our community. Good cause is another thing that we really need on the state level for us to be able for people to remain in the community, because we're being priced out. We're being priced out of the homes. The price of renting, it has gone up like crazy amounts, like $400 increase. And then when you're on a fixed income, if you're an older adult and you're on a fixed income, you can't afford that increase. So you're moving around. You see a lot of moving around. We see a lot of evictions. And we see real estate hiking up the prices of just housing for the taxes in our community. We see a tax increase. like, for example, people have brought their homes for $55,000. Now it's being assessed at $170,000. So that's like a very different tax burden on that individual. So those are some of the things that we're seeing in our community. And we're working on the Emergency Tenant Protection Act, like I said earlier. And that would help like 30,000 tenants in our community to be able to have stabilized rents. So this would help some of the bleeding, but we need more. Like we said, the situation is really getting crazy. We haven't seen an increase in funding for human health services. It's remained the same for over 20 years. And with the increase in rents, and we see a number of people being sanctioned as well. And we'd like to change that scenario, but we need our government officials to listen to what the people are saying, what they need and what they need. It's not going to work unless we all work together to make that happen. And thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you so much for being here, Liz, and for the work that you're doing for our communities around the state and in Rochester. We're gonna break now to hear sharing some music again, and I want to turn it over to Sharon Rebar from the Kairos Center.
Thanks, Reverend West, and grateful to be with you all today. And as many have just shared, the inequality that is just rampant in this state, knowing that what we're dealing with is not a lack of resources, but a lack of will, of moral and political will. Just knowing that there are over 4 million people that are poor and low income in this state. And at the same time, we have the most billionaires in our state across the world. We know that it's not a problem of lack, it's a problem of will. And we know that when people are refusing in our government to make sure there's adequate housing for everybody, to make sure that people have access to health care, that they're cutting education from our children, that these are mean things that are happening in this state. And so wanted to lift up this song today to know that these are wrong. This is just morally wrong, and there's something different that can be done. And that what we are doing, what we are calling faith leaders and people in our community to come together to know and ensure that a movement is building to say no more, and that something different can happen. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. But the movement's going on, and the movement's growing strong. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. Oh, those corporate profits soar, yet the poor pay more and more. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. But the movement's going on, and the movement's growing strong. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. There go those wealthy billionaires, dead and suffering everywhere. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. There are mean things happening in this land. But the movement's going on, and the movement's growing strong. There are mean things happening in this land, but there'll be good things happening in this land. Oh, there'll be good things happening in this land. When the dispossessed unite, the end of poverty is in sight. And there'll be good things happening in this land.
Yes, may it be so. There will be good things happening in this land. Thank you so much, Sharon. I'm going to turn it over now to Marina Marco O'Malley, who is the co-executive director of the Alliance for Quality Education. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you so much for having me, for giving me this opportunity to talk about where we are at the budget right now for our public schools, which I will be honest and say that it is, to me, it is still unfathomable that in 2024, only 6 months after we fully funded schools, after a 30-year fight, we are now back to talking about preventing cuts and fighting and pushing against cuts to our public schools. This past September was the very first time since we reformed our education system in 2007 and our funding formula in 2007, after the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit was settled by the state's highest court, and the state finally was compelled to reform it and fund it in 2007. 2023, September of 2023 was the very first time that our schools had the full funding that was promised to them by 2011. So 16 years too late, we finally had full funding, and we were incredibly grateful, because that's what you have to do, right? You're grateful that you have full funding for schools, and yet 6 months later, there was a proposal to cut foundation aid to our public schools, to change how it's calculated, because all of a sudden, while we are touting this historic moment of full funding schools, we also spend too much on education, and that's just not sustainable. Those are not my words, those are the governor's words. That's what she said in her delivery of her executive budget to justify these changes while touting the historic moment. Something doesn't compute, right? Something doesn't sit right. So thankfully, our legislature and the legislative leaders pushed back on that. And I will say, it's probably one of the very few times that Democrats and Republicans all united against pushing back education cuts and rejected the proposal that the governor put on the table. And while the legislators acknowledged that we do need to update the formula that was created in 2007 so that it reflects all of the changes that we went through in the last 5 years, the last 16 years, including the pandemic, and make sure that we meet our students' needs with revisions to the funding formula. So we want to make sure that legislative leaders stay strong in rejecting those proposals, that they fully fund schools. And in addition to that, let's not forget that our childcare system is the foundation of our education system. And in this budget, we need to make sure that our childcare educators receive adequate wages and so that they can make ends meet and feed their own families while nurturing our children, and something that we have not seen happen in the state budget just yet, and we're hopeful that the enacted budget will include. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Marina, for sharing that important context and for the work that you and AQE keep doing to move us forward. I'm going to turn it over now to Pastor Arelis Figueroa, Executive Director and Lead Pastor from La Iglesia del Pueblo in New York City.
Thank you, gracias. La Iglesia del Pueblo is a community founded in the tradition of Freedom Church for the Poor. And what we're doing right now is, more than anything, supporting immigrants, new immigrants, our newest New Yorker. And there is a question in the air. Why is New York spending so much money on asylum seekers if we are facing a deficit? Maybe we can go to the Bible. When a foreigner resides among you and your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner reside among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. And the Bible is full of passages like this that talk about protecting and welcoming the immigrants and the poor, and even keeping provision for them during harvest. Also, history have taught us that instead of being a burden for the societies where we arrive, we immigrants contribute greatly to the economic growth of the particular nation where we landed. Right now, the office of the New York City Comptroller, Brad Lander, just posted a fact sheet in their website with the title, Fat No Fear, How Welcoming New Immigrants Benefit New York City. I invite you to look for that. And I just want to say a few of the findings. Immigrants in New York are more likely to be employed and more likely to create jobs by starting a business and contribute billions of dollars to our New York economy in spending power and tax revenue. In 2021, immigrants New Yorkers pay $61 billion in taxes and constitute $138 billion in spending power. They even remind us that when New York City faced abandonment and fiscal crisis in the 1970s, a strong way of immigration contributed to public safety, increase the city population, and boost public revenue. And our neighbors, Rochester, Syracuse, Utica, experiencing an economic revitalization after welcoming new arrivals who have opened new business, contribute to population growth, rebuild homes, and contribute millions of taxes and spending power. That this nation of immigrants, considered by many a Christian nation, choose to ignore numbers like this, refusing to make a priority to legislate in favor of immigrants, is unacceptable and is outright wrong. We don't have to choose between meeting the needs of newly arrived New Yorkers or meeting the need of everyone else in this budget. We have an abundance of resources, as having said here, in our state, and that is even more true when we invest in the public goods that help all of our community thrive. As we say in the Poor People's Campaign and National for Moral Revival, when we reach from the bottom, everybody rises. Amen.
Everybody rises. That's right. When we lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Thank you so much, Arelis. We are also honored to have with us Julia Salo from the Caring Majority to share some words about another one of the really critical fights that is at stake right now. Julia, thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's so appropriate that we're talking about a call for a moral budget, because the cuts that are being proposed right now in New York are just wrong. Similar to Marina and the backsliding on education, we have a state that is backsliding on their commitment to home health care. Home health care is, essential. If you ask anybody, most people have some kind of a story of either needing care, hiring a caregiver, or being a caregiver for someone. And our population is aging. Our baby boomers are aging, and while we don't like to think about it, 7 out of 10 of us will need long-term care at some point in our lives. And most of us want that care to happen in our own homes and communities, not in a nursing home. But we face huge obstacles to meet that growing need for home care. We actually have the worst home care shortage in the nation in New York State. And a huge reason for this shortage is the low pay that these home care workers receive.
Yes.
60% of home care workers rely on some form of public assistance to just survive. And we have to look at this as for all of its intersectional injustices. This is a mostly women of color workforce. This is mostly an immigrant workforce. And, they're serving people with disabilities and older adults. So it's racism, it's ageism, it's sexism, it's everything, it's ableism. And our governor and legislature took a step toward fair pay for home care workers just a couple years ago. In 2021, they did give a $3 increase for home care workers in New York State. But since then, we have seen consistent efforts by our governor to erode this progress. And this year is no exception. The governor has proposed $1.2 billion in cuts to the popular consumer-directed home care program, which allows people to hire somebody that they trust to provide their home care and come into their home and provide intimate care. And so her cuts, there's many different cuts, but just some of the worst it would return 175,000 home care workers back to what they were making in 2018, which is just wrong. It would also, her cuts would basically ban children with disabilities and people with cognitive disabilities who aren't able to self-direct their home care. It would ban them from the consumer-directed program. And that would impact 100,000 people in New York State and basically kick them out of this popular home care program. So we have a big battle in front of us to fight these cuts, but also to put forward our vision for what is needed, right? We need fair pay for home care. We need living wages for this workforce and benefits for this workforce and a valuing of this workforce and the people that they serve. We also need to address some of the profiteering that's happening in our home care system. Our Medicaid home care system was privatized in 2011, and private insurance companies are sucking billions of dollars out of our system in profits and excessive administrative fees. Why don't we look at that as a place to cut versus cutting home care worker wages and cutting services from people who need it? And so I'm really glad to be with you all. All of our issues are interconnected, and we are going to fight till the very end for a moral budget this year. Thank you so much.
Yes, we're going to keep fighting. Thank you so much, Julia. We are coming to our final speaker, and then we're going to close out with a song. But we are so honored and blessed to have with us Reverend Liz Theo-Harris, the Executive Director of the Cairo Center for Religions, Rights, and Social Justice.
Thank you so much, Wes. It's an honor to be with everyone today. As a Presbyterian pastor, a theologian, a proud New York City resident, and a mother of public school children and teenagers attending low-income schools, I am compelled to pray on, to speak out, and to organize towards a just budget in New York State. This is a time when more and more New Yorkers are turning to food pantries, working multiple jobs in order to make ends meet. This is a time when folk are leaving the state because they can no longer afford to live here. And this moment with this state budget offers an opportunity to make transformative investments that can help our communities not only survive, but to actually thrive. So the question that we have today, that I have today, is will we seize the moment, take care of those most vulnerable among us, or are we going to turn a blind eye to the suffering that surrounds us? We've heard this morning from faith and community leaders across the state. We've heard what is at stake with this budget: healthcare, including home health aides on the chopping block, education cuts threatened, New York on the verge of refusing to house the people with good cause eviction protections, housing access vouchers. We know that by refusing to enact fair taxation, our state may give up on resources to ensure clean air for all, and so much more. It's just a few days after Easter, a day that proclaims life over death, abundance over abandonment, resurrection over suffering and cuts. My faith tradition reminds us that budgets are moral documents, and any budget that grinds the face of the poor, like this one has the possibility of doing, is unjust, and it's immoral, and it's wrong. Instead, the Bible teaches that when our states invest in programs of social uplift, when we expand healthcare to all, when we pay workers a living wage, when we organize ourselves around the needs of the least of these, who are most of us, that our whole society will flourish, that children will live long, full lives, the elderly will flourish, and that all will be blessed. So today, as this budget is not yet finalized, our message to the governor and to our legislators is do what is just and right. Do no cuts or policy violence, and choose life and life-saving programs, ending poverty from the bottom up. Thank you so much.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Reverend Liz. And thank you so much to everybody, all our speakers and groups who are here this morning. I want to turn it over now to Reverend Molly Dowell-Baum, who will close us out in song.
Thank you for that invitation to join you. Thank you to all my friends and co-workers, co-laborers who have spoken and shared your stories, who have shared your voice. When I think about the 140 million poor and low-wage workers, I am practicing thinking of that, including myself, and I challenge that to each one of you. And those of you who are faith leaders or leaders in your community of any sort, to help our siblings, our brothers and sisters, to understand that we're not talking about that other person over there. We're talking about me and you. And if it's not you today, it could be you tomorrow. How many of us are $400, $800, $1,000 away from, being, I'm losing my words, needing to go to the food pantry, not having secure housing. For me, I'm in the process of getting a divorce, and I've been going to the food pantry for the past few years. And I will be having to double up with another family. I'm having to face my kids moving out of their school district. And I have public school, my kids are in public schools, and they have been in Albany. And we chose Albany because we knew how important it is to get an education in diversity. almost more than, when you say like, oh, what are the numbers? What is your school's number? Are you a 3? Are you a 10? We're not saying like, well, how racist are we teaching our kids to be? How ableist are we teaching our kids to be? How misogynist or transphobic are we teaching our kids to be? And so it's all these things interconnected. And I myself have experienced many of these interconnected injustices, and it's so easy to fall into despair. And so, but there is a movement going on, and we can lift from the bottom. We can embrace ourselves, our neighbor, our coworkers, our family members, those who are already part of the 140 million, who are already poor, already living below the poverty line or just above, which frankly, as many of you know, is worse, can be worse because you can't get services and then you can't afford your health care. And then you're making choices between food and housing, etc. So this is all of us, and all of us, each one, everybody deserves a right to live. And so that's what we're going to go out on. We know that we are more powerful together. We know that scarcity is a lie. And truly, when we are rooted in love and when we are bound, when we join together, we know that we are more powerful than, than we think we are. So everybody has a right to live. And this is an old favorite of the PPC. It's also my younger child's very favorite song, and she loves to lead it. So she is, she's not here with me today, but in her spirit and the spirit of each child who is my child, who is, your child is my child. And together, let us raise our voices. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. Again, everybody's got a right to live. You and me do. Yeah, everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. Now here's the hip hop beat that we're gonna repeat. So repeat with your zoom on. Everybody's got a right to live, to live. Everybody's got a right to learn, to learn. Everybody's got a right to dream, to dream. Everybody's got a right to love, to love. Everybody's got a right to, everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. One more chant. Everybody's got a right to live, to live. Everybody's got a right to learn, to learn. Everybody's got a right to dream, to dream. Everybody's got a right to love, to love. Everybody's got a right to, everybody's got a right to housing. Everybody's got a right to housing. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to housing and healthcare. Everybody's got a right to healthcare. Everybody's got a right to healthcare. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to healthcare and food. Everybody's got a right to healthy food. Oh, everybody's got a right to food. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to food. All the things now. Everybody's got a right to live. Everybody's got a right to live. And before this campaign fails, we'll all go down to jail because everybody's got a right to live. Yes, everybody's got a right to live. Thank you. Peace.